Good evening to everyone from wherever you are. We want to send greetings to everyone. Hopefully, your week went well. It is Sunday yet again, and as promised, we come to you with the Tower at UNN. And today, obviously, with me, I have Senior Gombya here with me in the studio, and we're going to be going over a few things. But I wanted to say one welcome, and hopefully, however this Sunday finds you, it either goes in the trajectory you want it to go, or you either reconcile with the things that you didn't manage to achieve this week. But I'll give this opportunity for Senior Gombia to also send out his greetings and regards before we get started on today's show.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you tonight. It's a very memorable day, and this show is going to be talking about lots of things that have happened to our country in the last 35, 36 years. So I'm so happy to be with you. I'm so happy to see you, Dee, after such a long time, and I'm ready to go.
Okay, perfect. So for today's show, Senior Gombia, I think what is happening to our nation, and with our nation, I mean our people, is a lack of understanding that the procedures and protocols that are happening now with the Museveni regime is something that has been generational happening to the peoples of Uganda, and it remains to be generational. So today I wanted to dig into what actually, so that our generation has an understanding, or all generations that are out there and still lack an understanding, what is meant when the warlord in Museveni goes and writes a book about sowing a mustard seed. What is this mustard seed? What did it mean as a reporter who covered that time? So we're going to dive into that topic slowly by slowly and try to learn how can we actually uproot this tree, because we cannot deny that the tree has grown, and the tree has grown to be a parasitic tree within the garden. So how do we uproot such a tree? But firstly, how do we start to even understand what was going on in that period of time with everything that was happening? So for us, in order to have this conversation, I wanted us to start from the 1969 to 70s, where we have the first of the Obote regime, and to talk about the global context at that during that period of time. I don't know whether at that time you had started reporting, because that was about 1969 to 1970 when Obote is overthrown by Idi Amin and the world is in a Cold War. What effects did that have on Uganda and the change of Uganda's parliament, and how was that reported, and how were citizens informed of these changes, and how did that change come, and how did that escalate what was later on to come, with Museveni turning from being a face within the crowd to now the person that we've grown to learn he is.
That's very good. I'm so happy to talk about that tonight. As soon as have we played the national anthem yet, or are we going to play it before?
I think we definitely have not played the national anthem yet. I don't know if our producer actually has the national anthem, but if our producer has the national anthem, could you please cue it up for us so that we start with the anthem and then lead into discussion as well? That skipped my mind. That's on me. I do not think our producer might have the national anthem on hand. Oh yeah, our producer does not have the national anthem on hand. I'm sorry, today we would have to bypass the national
We
anthem, or
do
we
have
can sing the national anthem ourselves if we do wish to. But going back to the first question of
okay.
how does that, because how does that setting lead to where we find ourselves now, knowing that Museveni at the time was working in the Obote regime and managed to grow political relationships with important people within the East African community during that period of time.
Let's, I can responsibly talk about what happened in Uganda. As far as I can remember, I think I can start with the year 1966 when Milton Obote's forces, led by General Amin, attacked Lubiri barracks in an attempt to overthrow or capture the Kabaka of Buganda, by then Edward Mutesa II. I remember very, very clearly as a young man, not a young man, I think a teenager. I think I was in my, I was barely 12 years when that happened. And I remember when the Rubiri barracks was attacked, I was in my home village of Bugema, where where at the moment we have Bugema University. That is where I was born and where I grew up. And I remember elders all over that area were digging trenches in roads to make it difficult for army trucks to cross, because they were all incensed about the attack and they were very, very angry. There was a lot of anger. That anger of the attack on Rubiri barracks or Rubiri palace spread into what was to come into Uganda many, many years later. I remember time that ministers were given a new constitution by Milton Obote, and he told them that the parliament at that time did not discuss the new constitution that Milton Obote had set up after removing Mutesa from his palace. And he went into parliament and said, there's a new constitution. From now on, Uganda is a republic. Before that time, Uganda wasn't a republic. Uganda was a constitutional monarchy. But Milton, when it came to parliament, says there's a new constitution. You'll find it in your pigeonholes. And after that, sorry?
Oh, no, go ahead.
And after that, he announced the detention of several of ministers within his own party. Most of those who were trying actually to unseat him from being leader of the Uganda People's Congress. That is where Uganda's problems started. The troubles of 1966, that is where Uganda's problems started, and they have never ended to this day.
So I want to ask you a question in that regard, because it's always referenced 1966, the Lubiri is attacked, and we have this pigeonhole constitution. But what I think it will help all of us if we're all on the same page of what is clear. How does Uganda switch from a constitutional? How does Uganda even in the first place get into a constitution monarchy? And what does this mean for all the different groupings that had been put together as Uganda? What did this mean for this? Because why is it, we all understand why this is, but as someone who has the experience of being in that space and during that time, what did it for the Lubiri to be attacked? Because I think now, a few decades later, for me, it's like we just stand it via textbook that the British came, they made Buganda, which was already a nation, and they made it spearhead this country, Uganda, and gave it this favoritism that doesn't exist and made Uganda a protectorate. But we really don't have an atmosphere behind such an act like that done Bote and what that meant of the previous acts that were already been that had already been in place. So what does it mean when the Luviri is attacked, and what does it mean for Uganda to move from that constitutional monarchy? How did it get to constitutional monarchy? Why is it that Obote attended to accept after independence for Uganda to be ruled like this and changes his mind in 1966? What aggressions behind this shift of mentality now that we're still dealing with that we cannot agree to this day?
What has to be understood from the very onset is that from the very beginning, Uganda was never a republic. And as I said, Uganda became only republic when Milton Obote assumed power from what was happening then. Before, you have to remember, or everyone has to remember, that the Buganda nation was the seat of government in Uganda,
Okay. Mm,
very, very clearly led by the Kabaka of Uganda. And the powers that were to be during that time were in the hands of the Kabaka. Kabaka was the supreme leader. But then we had the 1900 agreement, which transformed the Kabakaship in bringing other people of Uganda. People have to remember that actually the name Uganda derives from the name Buganda. There was no Uganda before Buganda. That is what people do not understand, most of people. There was no Uganda without Buganda. Buganda was and has always been there before Uganda. So when the colonials came and they begged the Kabaka of Buganda, because he was the supreme leader of the country. When I say the supreme leader of the country, at that time we didn't have states like Acholi, Lango, and so on. The only two known counties or states in Buganda or in Uganda at that time was primarily Buganda, Bunyoro, and Busoga.
Yeah.
And these three states were the most powerful in the country, in the history of our country. Buganda was powerful, Bunyoro was very powerful, and Busoga too. I have not read of any other powerful uh, state in Uganda, before or before those three. So Bunyoro, Buganda, Busoga were very, very powerful. They used to conduct a lot of wars. There were so many wars fought between Buganda and Bunyoro. There were so many wars fought with Basoga, but I don't read of wars fought between other tribes in Uganda. So when the colonials came and the people of Uganda, unwillingly or unadvisedly accepted the suggestion by the colonialists that we bring all of these, by then we called it tribes, now we call them states because we want to bring in a different kind of leadership in Uganda. But they were tribes. The colonists brought in the Cholis, the Langis, the Rugbaras, the Atesos. But you for all of you who follow Ugandan history, you might understand that when you look at people who come from the north, they're more aligned to countries like Sudan
And Kenya too,
and Kenya too. And
because
you
of how the
see,
border.
the confusion was brought by the British colonialists with the
Of course.
intention of dividing and ruling the country that they could not rule, because when they came to which is present day Uganda, but which was then Buganda, they realized that Buganda was a state that had all the ingredients of a well managed country,
A
which had a
self-governing.
judiciary, which had an army, which had a prison system, which had chiefs that were running the country properly. And that is why it was not possible for Britain to colonize Uganda or Buganda because of the system of government that was in the country. Uh, Britain was managed to go and colonize our neighbors in Kenya, but it could not colonize us. That is why we became a a protectorate. That the British gave us a protection that they would look protect Buganda, not Uganda, to protect Uganda against its enemies. And at that time, our enemies were Bunyoro mostly.
And they kept
And
your enemies close.
yes, and Busoga. Because in
Yes.
Buganda, all the years that I was growing up, the worst chicken in my father's home was called a Kanyoro chicken. Because everything bad was Banyoro. We hated Banyoro so badly. And the Banyoro hated us so badly. You know why? Because the Banyoro were so mighty. They were fighters. They beat
Yeah.
us, beat
Yeah.
them. So we hated each other very, very
I
badly.
have a question about that because this has happened in uh, it's I have a question about that because it has happened with so many other groups, and most historians always come back to say that that hatred does not come just out of hate, but a sense of admiration for each other.
Well,
Because
you can
you've
call
won
it,
some battles and they've won some battles.
yeah, because yes, I've recognized, and I've recognized just a few minutes ago that the Banyoro were very, very good fighters. So were we, the Baganda. So we hated each other because we knew we could either beat them or they could beat us too. And that's why we called everything bad a Kinyoro thing. That you speak like a Mnyoro, you talk like a Mnyoro, you sit like a Mnyoro, because we hated it. And I think they hated us too because of, of what we had. But eventually, the Baganda came on top of the Banyoro, and that's why the Uganda kingdom was very, very powerful. And that is why when the British colonials came to Uganda, they found a kind of state which was well organized. And I keep repeating this. And I want to remind people that wherever the colonists went, when apart from Buganda, wherever they went, they found people naked. They were men, women, children were walking naked. They came to Buganda and they found that the Buganda had back cloth. They had made clothes to
And
clothe
that's
themselves. They never found anybody walking naked in Buganda. And that actually very much impressed the colonials because they saw a, a country well run with judges, with, a palace, with chiefs, and all running with soldiers, with the police, with the prisons. They didn't find that anywhere. And that is why the agreements made with Uganda or Buganda was with Baganda because that was the only country that was known. All these other people around us, all our brothers from all our regions, yes, they're now part of Uganda. We can never ever now deny that they're part of us, but it has to be recognized that civilization in Uganda started in Buganda, and the British, when they came, they recognized that.
I think this points to now bringing us back to 1966, where Obote's actions are not an attack on the Lubiri, but are an attack on the state itself. And that's
They
something
are
I
not
think that.
I
we fail
remember
to
very,
understand.
very well the attack on really because before that there was a big disagreement between um, the Kabaka of Uganda, who had been ill-advised to take the post of president of Uganda when Uganda became
Mm,
independent. That was
mm,
because a president, a Kabaka, should never have been made president. The Kabaka should have stayed away from that. But the moment that Kabaka Mutesa accepted to become president of Uganda, first president of Uganda, it
mm,
made the prime minister, who was then Milton Obote, become so powerful because the
mm,
prime minister had executive power. Like
mm.
here, we have the queen, who is the head of state, but she
Yeah.
has no executive power. The executive powers are in the hands of the prime minister, Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson can declare war against any other country. The Queen cannot
Mm,
because the Queen hasn't got that power. That is a mistake the Baganda made by accepting to become president, a toothless president with no executive powers. Milton Obote left all the way to State House because he was in control of the country.
mm,
And
mm,
when when the Kabaka realized that the prime minister was actually more powerful than him, he started saying and ordering the central government to move away from Buganda land.
mm,
That is where the problem came from because Kabaka Mutesa gave an order and said, you must remove the central government from the land of Buganda and go and put it somewhere. And
mm,
the prime minister, Milton Obote, said, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. I have the army. And then he ordered the army to go and take over the Kabaka ship and take over the palace and remove the kingdom of Uganda or the kingdoms. That is where the problem started. You
mm,
can ask any historian in Uganda, they'll tell you Uganda has never had peace and prosperity as it had before that incident of the attack on Buganda and removal of the kingdoms, not only in Buganda, from all over Buganda. Uganda has never
from all.
had peace until today. We are
Mm.
still suffering
So,
from an act made by one
mm,
man to be
mm,
in power to make Uganda a
mm,
republic. Since we became a republic, Uganda has never had peace. To this day,
mm,
has never had a peaceful change of government, has never had a peaceful change of leadership up to now.
mm. So that brings me to the next question to I think the man of the hour that we're talking about today. So how does Museveni in the background, with later on joining Obote's regime, learn about the weaknesses of who would later be citizens of Uganda? Because here we have a nation that has been fabricated and brought together by the colonizers off of the back of Buganda. A lot of sentiments from Baganda about reclaiming Buganda, but it's not only Baganda. The Banyankole as well, the Banyoro as well, the Basoga as well want to reclaim. The Basoga want to, like, everyone wants to reclaim their Chabazinga or their kingship and their nationhood, and they're trapped in this Uganda Republic banana. Museveni learn about that in the background and actually come and maneuver his way into power because he was a face in a crowd. But now we all know what that face looks like. It stands out from any crowd. You might go back and watch all those video clips from that time, and he's no longer an unimportant face. He has brought so much havoc his way because I really think he studied during that Obote. So how does he and when does he start learning of our weaknesses? And how does he use them against us, not only the Baganda, but everyone surrounding?
Okay, when in 1966, Milton Obote ordered
Mm.
General Idi Amin to attack the palace at
Mm.
Mengo, that was a game changer.
Mm.
And from that day, the parliament, the people in the Uganda People's Congress themselves tried very,
Mm.
very much to remove Milton Obote from power. So Milton
Okay.
Obote assumes power, starts draconian laws
Mm.
that ended up in him trying to disarm any other people in the armed forces who are not Acholi or Langi. And that is
Mm-hmm.
where Idi Amin came in, because Idi Amin
Mm.
was a Kakwa from northern Uganda. Most people think that he actually comes from Sudan.
Mm.
Uh, but we had Nubians in Uganda. Nubians came from Sudan, and
Mm.
Idi Amin was part of that tribal area. And the
Mm.
moment that Amin was then, who had become powerful, because he's the one who was ordered to overthrow the Kabak of Uganda, he
Mm.
gained a lot of power as army commander.
Mm.
And
Mm.
when he saw that Milton Obote was trying to disarm other
Mm.
tribes within the army,
Mm.
he took over power. And Milton Obote was in Singapore attending the Commonwealth Conference and was overthrown. And Idi Amin took over power. I remember very well the celebrations that took place when Idi Amin overthrew Obote.
Mm.
I think we may have a clip somewhere in the studios. I don't know whether you have it, to show people celebrating the overthrow of Milton Obote in 1971. Now,
Yeah, I think we do have a clip, but that one we decided not to share it, but we will share it online so that people can refer to it.
okay,
But there is footage of that.
okay, and when Idi Amin overthrew Milton Obote, we thought that things were going to change for the better.
Yeah.
Idi Amin actually appointed a very, very capable cabinet.
Mm.
Most of the
Mm.
people in Idi Amin's first cabinet were qualified people
Mm.
with experience, with a lot of education. He didn't come
Mm.
out and start naming ministers from the army and so on, which he did afterwards. But the first cabinet of Idi Amin was well equipped to deal with the problems of Uganda. But
Mm.
then the people who started to fight him, the likes of Yoweri Museveni, the likes of
Mm.
others, made Idi Amin change and started getting rid of those people who he had first elected to come to office and serve him. Had he stayed with the cabinet that he named first,
Mm.
Idi Amin would have done very well. But the attacks that started after that, mostly by those who went to exile in Kenya, went to
Mm.
exile in Tanzania.
Mm.
70 had by then, before at the time that Milton Obote was from, Museveni was working in the president's office,
Yeah.
Milton Obote's office.
Mm.
So he knew a lot about what was happening there. And when Idi Amin overthrew Obote, Museveni with
Mm.
others went to Tanzania. Museveni
Mm.
went to Tanzania. I understand he registered to University of Dar es
Dar es
Salaam
Salaam.
to study politics, but we have no indication of what degree he got, and we have no
mm,
information of whether he actually sat any exam there. But while he was there, he also took part in the struggles that were going around in that area, especially in Mozambique.
mm,
And he joined the Frelimo fighters who were fighting the
mm.
Portuguese colonials at that time. So that is where he
Yeah.
starts his experience of fighting in the bush
Mm,
against incumbent government.
mm,
But I've spoken to a lot of people who are with Museveni in Dar es Salaam, and a lot of
mm,
them say they always try to avoid him. When they saw him, he always wanted to speak to people and tell them about his stories, and they always avoided him. I know a
mm,
good friend of mine who I'm not going to mention on this program, who said very clearly that everybody tried to avoid Museveni when
mm,
was they were in Dar es Salaam and fighting the regimes of Idi Amin.
mm,
But you see, then there was the attempt by the Ugandan who had fled into exile to overthrow Idi Amin. I think around
mm.
1972. They came through this massacre. They tried to go through massacre to come and overthrow Museveni. I mean, Idi Amin, and they were given a bloody nose, and a lot of innocent
Yeah.
people. The
Mm,
problem that I've always told Ugandans was that while Idi Amin was killing people and leaving the dead bodies on the streets, uncovered, and Museveni came to power, started killing
mm.
people and hiding the bodies.
He knew the shock value.
so,
Mm,
so it was not evident that this is a
yeah.
man who was killing people. But in actual
Mm,
fact, we have ended up with having somebody who has killed more people than Idi Amin ever did. And that's a
yeah.
fact. We have
Of
ended up
course.
with having a leader who is worse
Mm,
than General Idi Amin. Take a poll all around Uganda. Ugandans will tell
mm.
you Idi Amin was much, much better than President Museveni.
And that leads me to my next question because it's the creation of this image of Museveni, and that could never have happened without the help of journalism at the time and the coverage of the Bush War all the years that existed. But before we dive into that question, there's a question on this relationship that Museveni had with Nyerere, as with former President Nyerere. As you had mentioned, he went to University of Dar es Salaam. From what I've seen so far, he was in a law degree that seemed to be a little bit heavy for him at the time. He dropped out of the law degree 2 years in, and then he changed to a political science degree, but we don't know whether he graduated or not. I cannot affirm to his graduation or not. But he ended up studying political science and wrote a paper whereby he paper was in reference to president at the time and a comparison of him, and he ended up inviting him and they built a relationship. So this is how I guess Obote gets linked because he had also built a relationship with Obote during his time. This is how they're getting this relationship going, and how does because Museveni was there for Obote one, but how does Museveni end up being there for Obote 2? Like, how does Obote 2 actually, in actual fact, happen? How do Ugandans let this happen? That's one of the things I failed to understand till this day.
Museveni never ever got anywhere near Obote 2 at all.
Mm, okay.
They avoided him.
Mm,
They avoided him at every when Idi Amin was overthrown. Museveni was among those who were given cabinet ministries. He became Minister of Defense.
mm,
And while he was Minister of Defense, he recruited a lot of people into secret
Mm,
army that nobody knew about.
mm,
His plan was always to get to power, regardless.
of course. Mm,
Milton Obote realized that he was recruiting people.
mm,
And by then, Obote had not come into power because by the time Obote became president again, uh, Museveni was no longer Minister of Defense. India had
mm,
been cascated and thrown away. Remember, he also tried to form a political party, Uganda People's Movement, where he never
mm,
got even a single vote, apart from one that was won, only one vote that was won by I can't remember the gentleman now.
mm,
Only one vote, but Museveni himself never got a single vote in that
mm,
election of 1980, 82. Um, but the idea behind all of this was that Museveni, for himself, his idea was to get into power at whatever cost.
mm,
We talked about you've mentioned before the book he's written, the
to
Mustard
sow a
Seed.
massive.
Yeah,
Mm,
the Mustard Seed is about making Ugandans be revolutionary
mm,
and implanting into Ugandans a kind of spirit whereby they'll fight to plant
mm,
revolution among the countrymen.
mm,
Now, you can you can see what has happened today, whereby
mm,
while Museveni used that chance to plant the seed to revolutionize Ugandans and make them fight, today, if you try to do that, you end up being incarcerated, if not killed, because
mm,
they will not be allowed to do anything. You at the moment, it is very very difficult to start a revolution like he did, where he started in Buganda, of all
mm.
places, because first of all, he was refused to start that kind of revolution in an area he says he was born
He
in
comes
Western
from.
Uganda. The people there said, no, don't bring wars to us. And you have to remember that most people in Western Uganda by then were supporters
Mm,
of the Uganda People's Congress. So
mm,
when Museveni tried to take his war to a place where he was born in, they told him to go off, to F off,
mm,
if I can
mm,
use that expression.
mm.
And he came to Buganda, and Buganda, we gave him, uh, we welcomed him because we had this
Well, welcome, card.
Uganda, we had this anger of
Ah,
Obote.
now it makes sense from 1966. So this he uses other people's weaknesses because from 1966 Buganda still has that anger over the Obote regime.
Yeah.
So okay, in that case, Senior Gombia, I guess then the next question is because Museveni is always so adamant to talk about this idea that you talked about, starting a revolution, revolutionary, having a revolutionary spirit. But
Yes,
the
Master.
ultimate question is was it a revolution or was it just his? Because we all know it was his pathway to power, but where's the revolution? Because the national resistance movement was set in place to provide this space because he believed that soldiers without political training will not be soldiers. But what happens afterwards? We now have all these different institutions: CMI, ISO, what is the other one? ESO. We have SFC, and it seems to be the pattern seems to be the same, whereby our UPDF day-to-day policemen have no political recognition whatsoever. But that's an assumption from me. I assume that they definitely are looking for change, but you won't tell me they have any political training if the job is to go out and beat people who are actually on the streets asking for change. So what
Eh,
happens with our military forces?
every country has got uh, special departments of security. And I
Of
don't think
course.
Uganda is different. But the
Of course.
pattern that
Mm,
Museveni has followed is very much mirrored to what Milton Obote had. And you
mm,
shouldn't be surprised because Museveni was part of that from the very beginning.
mm.
But
Of course.
the way they murder, the way they torture,
Mm,
is mirrored exactly as what was happening during Milton Obote's time. Leave
mm,
alone even Idi Amin's time, because during Idi Amin's time, and I'm sure that was before you were born, but I remember very well knowing Naguru, where that was a place of torture, and everyone knew that that is where Idi Amin was torturing. When Idi Amin
mm,
was overthrown at Nakasero, we found torture chambers that he was using. Those torture
mm,
chambers became alive again when Milton Obote returned the second time. The
mm,
same places are now being used as safe, safe houses to house political opponents of Yoweri Museveni. So
mm,
the difference is not any, you cannot say the difference because Yoweri
mm,
Museveni is doing exactly what he used to do when he was in the office of the president, of office of Milton Obote. And he's even doing worse because he's now got power. He's told everyone very, very openly that he does not serve
mm,
anybody. He's working for himself. He's not working for you poor Ugandans. He's working for himself and his
mm.
family. He stated that
That
openly. And I've never seen anybody say that in politics anywhere, where a leader comes and says, "Oh, you know what? I don't care what you people say. I don't work for you. I work for myself." And you stay and
mm,
you go in an election and you win again, and they elect you again to be their leader. It can only happen in
mm.
Uganda.
That leads us to like our next segment, and I will ask the producer to cue in the first video. And the question is going to be now: how do we have this character change his attitude and the way how he speaks about Ugandans to what we have now as a reporter that was there at the time? What can you revisit in building? I want us to look at building the image of Museveni. And of course, we've talked about Dar es Salaam and his time in Tanzania. And I want us to bring in the journalist, William Pike, as well, and talk about that together. But I'll wait for the producer to play the two videos back to back, and then we can pick up from there.
Okay.
I'm Yoni Groen, correspondent from the Netherlands. I'm Yoni Groen, correspondent from the Netherlands. I wanted to ask you about human rights reports. They say there's still a violation of human rights in Uganda and that there are thousands of people in prison without food. Would you comment on that?
Now, the violation of human rights, this is a departure from the Amnesty International report, because the Amnesty International report commends our government. It says it has performed well on the issue of human rights. Although our understanding of human rights is a bit deeper than the one of the Amnesty International, because Amnesty International confine themselves only to things like no arbitrary arrest, no torture in prison, that type of thing. But we think this is a bit limited, because okay, suppose I'm not arrested arbitrarily, but I am starving or I am sick. Now, am I a full human being? Am I enjoying my humanness? I think we ought to deepen this definition of human rights, not just confine it to rather superficial aspects, because I can live more miserably because of disease, because of ignorance, because of malnourishment, than even from torture and arrests and things like that. For instance, before we took power, we were losing 96,000 children every year from 6 preventable diseases that can be prevented by vaccination. These were whooping cough, measles, tetanus, polio, diphtheria. The other one is TB. These six immunizable diseases were killing 96,000 children of our people, our children every year before we took power. Okay, now assuming there was a government which was not putting people in prison, but failing to take action, and therefore causing the death of this number of children, how would you characterize it? So I think the Western concept of human rights needs to be deepened. It's simply measured for the Western countries. The Western countries have solved some of these basic problems. Like, for instance, their children, the death rate of children in Sweden, I think, is 7 children in every 1,000. I think that is the ratio. 7 children out of every 1,000 in Sweden die before the age of 1 or age of 5. But in Africa, in Uganda, for instance, the figure is 110 in every 1,000. In other countries, it is much worse, in some of the African countries. So now you wonder, when we only talk about freedom from arrest, and when you are put in prison, you should be given a bed and a mattress and a radio and all this, and you forget about 96,000 children every year. I don't know whether your sense of balance is correct. So I think that should also be clarified, because there's so much talk about human rights, but in this narrow sense. For us, we would like it in a deeper sense, in a more fundamental sense.
And I think the producer is going to play the second clip. But just for context, Senior Gombia, that was actually in the year that Dr. Sakome Kaira was put behind bars. And this is in response to all the other political opponents that are not opponents, but political threats to Museveni being locked up behind bars. That was in 1987 that he gave that answer.
If we revisit, I didn't know that we're going to revisit this, but we might as well. The problem of the arrest and substantial killing of Dr. Andrew Kaira, my friend, my house, was simply this, that at the time, Dr. Andrew Lutakome Kaira was so popular among Ugandans that he was seen as a threat, a big threat. People did not, I mean, you couldn't put an election and expect Yoweri Museveni to win when Andrew Kaira was there. That is the fact, that Yoweri Museveni fears anyone who even poses a small threat to his hold on to power. You have seen how many officers in the National Resistance Army, or the Uganda People's Defense Forces as it is now, have lost their lives because they have posed a threat to him. They have died. And they've said, oh, we're going to investigate this. We're going to investigate that. They haven't investigated his death. Murdered. One said, "Oh, he was going to South Korea, and suddenly had a problem in air, and he died. And when he was going to have a meal somewhere, and he died."
Mm.
I've spoken to those people before they died,
Yeah.
and I saw how powerful they were. For them, they were very convinced that what they fought for was not being implemented.
And
They
mustered,
fought
yeah.
to bring peace and prosperity to Uganda. They did not fight. Most of those who joined the NRM, who left their places, who left university without even waiting for their university exams, and went to the bush to fight. They fought because they believed that they were going to bring change, fundamental change to Uganda. They did not fight to bring change to one person holding on to power for over 35 years. Uganda remains the only country in Eastern Central Africa where power has never been changed properly, peacefully. No peaceful change of power since independence in 1962. Now, if you go and say you are going to plant a mustard seed of revolution, and you end up being in power for 35 years, if you go and write a book and say the only problem about Africa is those leaders who have stayed in power for too long, and you end up being the only person in your country or your supposed country who has been there for longer than anybody else, what does that tell you? When somebody
It's a
is
reaction.
even thinking that their sons, their daughters, their wives are going to take your seat, is this a master seed of change? No, it's not.
No, it's a
It's a master seed
reactionary.
of implanting one family into power for as long as they possibly can. But it can never be that way. History tells, and people ignore history at their own expense. History tells you that everything repeats itself. There is no way anyone can hold on to power for as long, for forever. Never. It has never happened anywhere. It will not happen in Uganda. And change will come in Uganda. Museveni likes it or not.
That brings me to our other segment. If the producer can go ahead and play that second video, as because these videos were both interesting, having Museveni talk about human rights and then having to see him what he thinks about child soldiers.
Human rights reports.
Okay.
They say
If you don't know. In Africa here, even by the age of 4, you learn how to fight. This is our tradition. If you don't know, fight with sticks, with a spear, with arrows. That's the tradition. So if you are trying to think that this may disorient them psychologically and so on, that is not the case. They are never deployed until the right age, but they learn the skills of warfare.
So, Senior Gombya, what is actually happening now with the media representation of Museveni? Because this is someone who's clearly showing that he's monstrous to a whole society. He's showing he will do damage to a whole society. But who cleaned him up so well that such is allowed, it's accepted, it's stomached?
I totally disagree with what he's just said there. that
Yeah.
people in Uganda, kids in Uganda, learn to fight from the age of 4. I was
Mm,
born in Uganda. I never left
mm,
Uganda until I was 30 years old. Nobody ever took me anywhere to teach me how to fight. So what
mm,
kind of Ugandans is he talking about? That
mm,
Ugandans, when they are at age 4, they are taught how to fight? Fight who? That's
mm,
nonsense. Nothing like that has ever happened. I was born in Uganda. I grew up in Uganda, although I've lived in Europe more longer than I've ever lived in Uganda. But I left Uganda when I was 30 years old, and nobody had ever taken me anywhere to teach me how to fight against
mm,
the government, to fight, to use arms, to dress up in a military uniform. Those kids were destroyed. Their future were destroyed. Where are they now? Can Museveni show us where those kids are? Those kids that he brought up fighting, letting them go and kill people. I remember very well when I was covering the war, when I found this kid who was about, I think, 12, and was wearing a major's uniform. And I asked,
mm,
how come you got this major's uniform? And I was told, oh, because he killed a UNLA major, and they gave him
mm,
that rank. I remember very clearly one day when I think I was with a team of Canadian journalists,
mm,
and a very, very young, I think about a 15-year-old kid came out of the
mm,
bush and nearly blew off our car away. And
mm,
before he could blow us off, because he came and targeted our vehicle,
mm,
and then his colleague said, no, 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 no. These are journalists. No, 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 no. These are international journalists. We would have been blown
mm,
away by this kid. And I will be here to tell that story today. But from 70
mm,
to say that Ugandans are taught to fight at age 4, what Ugandans?
mm,
Maybe Ugandans in the country where he was born. In the country where I was born, which is Uganda,
mm.
that never happened. We
So
didn't grow up
I
being
think
taught how to fight.
that's true. And I think this leads us to, because this is going to be our final segment. What I wanted us to really look at today is the journalism that was happening at that point in time. Do so many people that are covering the war or the Bush War, because Sir William Pike calls it a war so many people will not understand, because he covered the NRM side. Many people didn't understand why this was even happening in Uganda and what sparked this Bush War. So, how does it end up with so many different people covering? How do we end up with a sanitized Museveni who goes on to rule for 10 years? I remember William Pike says so many problems of Uganda, some of them are definitely Museveni's fault, but some of them were inevitable from the former regimes. Does this even hold true? And as a reporter that was there during this period of time, and a reporter who had colleagues, and your colleagues, what was happening behind, first of all, questions like the journalistic intentions to covering this war? What was it motivated by? How were you guys holding yourselves accountable during this time? And it's such a time whereby holding yourself even accountable to journalistic values, I could never imagine what that looks like. And what messages can we get from your memories? And I know this is a bit too much to ask, because you have to go and revisit that time. And I could feel even just revisiting child soldiers being forced into these conditions. But how does this become so normalized that Museveni comes on WBS TV and talks about it like it's what it is? This is Uganda, and seeing where we are at today with all these things coming down. What was happening? I think when we revisit what happened during of the war, we can start to see how we can start to really start to uproot this mastered tree that he feels like he's sitting in.
Any journalist worth
Mm,
their name should have from the
mm,
very outset condemned
mm,
the use of kids into the army.
mm,
I've told you, I saw these kids
mm.
having weapons that they could hardly lift up from
Carry.
the ground,
Yeah.
walking around with these elderly guys and
Mm,
being told to shoot people because they shot people.
mm,
Those kids
mm,
were murderers, actually. They could shoot you.
mm,
I nearly got killed by one of them. Many
mm,
times I really kept being killed, but they had no care because they were taught, they were brought into this situation whereby, first of all, their families have been wiped out,
mm,
either by the very person who is engaging them in battle or by the enemy forces.
mm,
And they're brought in. Look, they all look so innocent. What is
mm,
this we got in? They're told to go to to learn to kill people. You are taught to learn to shoot somebody when you are 7, when you are 8.
mm,
Who does that? And this again goes to the world. Why has Museveni never been prosecuted for having kids in his army?
mm,
Because he completely destroyed the lives of those kids. Not a single child soldier has ever come out to be today said, "Oh, I was a former child soldier. I'm now a major in the army, in Museveni's army."
mm,
Have you seen them?
yeah.
Where have these kids gone? Their
Exile
future
or
was
they're dead.
destroyed.
Mm,
Their future was destroyed. They're nowhere. Nobody talks about them, but Museveni used them. I saw them many, many times. I saw them in Museveni's convoy when I was covering the war in Uganda. And where are they today? Why?
mm,
The only one is a child soldier that ended up being anywhere was a child soldier who ended up trying to fight Museveni, and he ended up in the Hague, and is now in prison.
mm.
Child soldier
Wow.
forced to go and fight because they said, "Oh," and you know what?
Oh, can we have a name, please, Senior Gombya? Can we have his name?
I cannot remember the name, but that guy was. I think everybody knows the guy who was fighting in the north. I can't remember
Oh,
his name,
yes.
but yes,
Now I know who you're referencing.
he went to the Hague, and he's actually in prison now in the Hague.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
he went to the war because all his parents were killed either by Museveni or by the Obote forces.
Mm,
This happened in Buganda so much because I know stories of so many families in Buganda whose the whole family, the father, the mother gets killed. The soldiers come to the house, kill everybody, leave the kids, and as a kill because of that fear, that tremor
mm,
of seeing their parents being killed. They're told, "Come and join us. We're going to fight, and we're going to we are going revenge for the killing of their parents."
mm,
Look at those kids there. You can see innocent eyes. I saw these guys on the field when I was reporting on the war. I saw these were kids who actually didn't have, but they could not give a damn if they were told to
mm,
shoot somebody. They'll shoot you within a minute. I saw them shooting people.
mm,
They didn't care. Look at them. Look at them. Look at that. You can see from their eyes. They're quite innocent guys. They're kids.
yeah.
You
They're
open them.
dumbfounded.
You put them in the uniform.
Mm,
You give them a lethal weapon and you tell me it's okay to go and kill?
Mm.
Why
Then it
has
leads me
the
to my
world,
next question.
no,
Oh
before
no,
you,
sorry, come.
why has the world not prosecuted Yoweri Museveni for having kids in the army when he was trying to get in power? Why?
Mm,
Why has the world kept quiet about this?
mm.
Go
Because
ahead with
that
your
brings me
question.
to the next question. Because William Pipe is recognized for covering the bush tour, and we all know that so well. And how does in the general rhetoric of presenting the image of Museveni and the opportunities he held from Uganda, how does it shadow the gruesome activities that were actually happening behind the wall? Because it was not only child soldiers, it's the rape of civilians, the killing of civilians, you have the looting and the stealing from civilians, you have the militarization of civilians, and later on, even post war, you have the killing of potential threats by Museveni's regime. How does all this get covered and brushed over by having that journalistic power from his side of point of view? And how was that hard to counter? Because journalism, I'm guessing the only thing you can do is provide your opinion and hope that the people listen. So,
Okay,
what did it mean to be a journalist at this point in time and seeing the world not make him take accountability, and you trying to put the truth out there, or several other journalists trying to put the truth out there and asking him on human rights, but we cannot deny that there was counter journalism that claimed that Museveni was the solution for Uganda and had the answers for Uganda's problems.
do you know or have you heard of what Ugandans used to say that at least we can sleep
So we
now,
now sleep
or
at night. Yeah.
in Luganda, kastika start webaka kutulo.
Akakutulo. Yeah.
You know who was making them not sleep in their beds?
Yeah.
That's the plan that Yoweri Museveni did in
Mm,
Buganda.
mm,
He created havoc in my country of birth in Buganda. Museveni
mm,
created havoc to make sure that Buganda do not sleep, and they
mm,
hate what they used to go and raid places, kill everybody, turn up next
mm,
morning in civilian uniform with guns and say, you see, we're going to save you from that. The very thing that they did last night, they could come to Ruero, kill people, massacre people in their homes, children, wives, rape women in front of their children, rape men. You know, the worst thing I
mm,
found about the NRM at that time was raping men in front of their children.
mm.
And then come in the next morning dressed in civilian uniform with a gun and say, we are here to protect you. Now, if there's
It's
been,
what they did in the Northern War as well.
yeah, this has been an attack.
Mm,
Where do these people come all of a sudden and say, oh, we're now here to help you? Where were you last night when we were being attacked?
mm,
I lost a lot of people, my
mm,
relatives in Luero. I am a Luero
mm,
guy. I was born in Luero district. I'm a Luero guy. And I know I covered the area during
mm,
Museveni's onslaught on the Obote government. We lost a lot of people. My uncles, my nieces, my cousins, we lost them
mm,
because they could come, raid a village. There's no army, Ugandan army anywhere at all. Suddenly, they come at night, kill up everybody. In the morning, they come and say, oh, we are going to liberate you. We
mm.
have to fight these people who have done this. And these
Mm.
have done it themselves. And Museveni
So,
never ever wants to speak about that.
so a
That is
question
the
after. Mm. No,
Oh,
please finish. Oh no, please
go.
finish because because the next is why is it because I'm assuming like after this all that you're sharing with us all these things that have not been made space for or wanted to speak about it. I guess the question is why doesn't the world want to revisit uh first of all, their support, baiting, and aiding of Museveni into power, but why don't they want to even revisit the gruesome activities of his regime, all the way from what happened in Luwero to what happened in Acholi region? And I've watched was it there's a documentary on what happened in Acholi called "The Brilliant Side," and on there, I think on there was one of your colleagues, Professor Alimadi, says it seems to a point, or it's evident to a point whereby they just don't care because this is Africans dying, and you have a lot of documented evidence to prove that his military forces are doing this, and it's a war crime. And what we get is what you said: a child soldier being convicted in The Hague for all to take the blow for all of this, which is Museveni's doing, who remains president. In so.
I can tell you this
Mm,
that I've spent I've lived in Europe
mm.
now for 35 years.
Yeah.
What I've learned about the European or the world powers is that as long as they can still
Mm,
use a regime anywhere in the third world for their own purposes, they
mm,
disregard anything that the regime does, no matter
true.
how many people die.
Mm.
As long as
And
Yoweri
Museveni.
Museveni is still useful to the West,
Mm,
they will not give a damn about how
mm,
many people die. But the moment they get tired of him, you won't see
mm,
him stay any longer.
mm.
We haven't got to that stage yet because up
Yeah.
to now, Museveni is so useful to the West,
Mm,
providing innocent Ugandans to go and fight Western wars in
mm.
Somalia, in Sudan, in Iraq.
Everywhere.
Museveni is always willing to offer
In
soldiers
Iran.
to go anywhere. Those soldiers are
Mm,
not his his children, the children of Ugandans. And when they
mm,
die, he has no accountability for them. He doesn't
mm,
fear that, oh, when those kids who are taken to fight these wars don't come back, he's got to explain to Parliament why he's lost about 100 soldiers. No accountability at all.
mm.
This Western country, which has given us accommodation, is guilty of aiding continued dictatorship in a lot of African and third world countries.
Mm. And that brings me then to the last question, whereby uh, we have, and of course it's within the same rhythm, but how do we start to break away from points that kind of happened already, where you have a journalist from the UK take on in all the glory of bringing Museveni into power, make a career out of it, have Museveni commend him for his business mentality by taking over of the New Vision network. New Vision News? How do we learn from those experiences that have only hurt us with William Pike's coverage and what it has led to a disregard of actual Ugandan sentiment and a glorification of just the parasite that Muslim is? How do we move away from that, and how do we stay accountable in that beat? Because even when this revolution started, I don't want to put it in quotation marks because Ugandans are seriously tired and want change. All the coverage that was happening was still happening on the same avenues, sponsored by the West, for that media. Apart from the one unique thing about this time was the involvement of Ugandans on the ground with their telephones. That was the one unique fact that even Museveni cannot control. video footage by Ugandans and all of that provided a different avenue source that cannot be censored so easily. Because imagine in the bush where only a few reporters were there to record. So imagine if everyone had a phone during that period of time, it changes the dynamic of the game. So how do we remain keen and not let this fall into the same patterns all over again?
Very good question. I will try and answer it this way. I'll give you examples. Uganda has had and still has a lot of very, very capable journalists who can research, who can tell a story. Only one weakness we have in Uganda is the weakness of
Money, yeah.
giving in to being bought. I'm not ashamed, I'm not afraid to mention one particular Ugandan who was a very, very, very capable Ugandan journalist. Have you ever heard of a Ugandan journalist called Mwenda?
Oh, yes. Recently, his brother. Yes, I have heard of Andrew Mwenda.
Very, very capable Ugandan journalist who was bought by Yoweri Museveni and no longer writes anything that is actually very harmful to him. Mwenda could have helped. There's so many Mwendas in Uganda who eventually end up with, with the promises of, not promises, being made capable of having a good life, building nice houses. Why should you go and fight for a cause when you know that if you fight a cause, you won't have a nice house around? So people like Mwenda, who would have stuck to their ideology of informing, like, I've never been bought by anybody. I have had so many offers to return to Uganda. There's a minister who came here and told me, I'm going back with Uganda with you. I've been told to take you. Please come. We're going to take you back. I said, to go back where? To the same mess I left? And I refused. I've never given in to anybody. I wish there were so many people like me who can say, no, 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 we must expose what is happening. I pity my colleagues in Uganda because I know the weakness. This is the companies they work for are not companies that can give them enough money like the state can give them. I know there's a lot of them who are not being paid off. But if they are going to threaten your job and they say, if you do this, if you're going to report this, your paper is going to be closed off. Your paper is going to be struck off. I know a lot of newspaper managers in Uganda, owners, who cannot carry stories, yet I could say them here. They know the stories, but they can't because they know if the moment they print a story, their paper is going to be struck off. And that means all their employers will lose their jobs, the company will lose its business, and so on and so forth. So the threat against Ugandan journalism is great. But I think there are people like Mwenda who could have gone even further and said, no, 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 I'm not going to give in to this. But Mwenda gives it to Museveni, Mwenda gives it into Kaguta, Mwenda becomes the center of information. Mwenda could get any information he wants. He knows what's going on, but he can't because he knows whatever he's going to say is going to spoil the people that feed him. That's where we've gone wrong. And I can't see that stopping until this regime is taken out of existence.
So, as we conclude today's show, I guess we were talking about trying to understand the mustard seed and its uprooting. And I think for the final question, it will be, with all your experience and with all the coverage that you have done on this regime, what what are the things that remain in terms of, as we organize ourselves and come together as Ugandans in the diaspora and with in unison with, of course, Ugandans at home? How, I guess my question will be, I think for the last question I'll actually ask, because you did talk about how Uganda was in a constitutional monarchy and changed into a republic. How can we aggravate the fear of Museveni losing his republic? Because now the war is for Museveni to lose authority to a republic and totally transform Uganda to something that is not a republic. Because it's only within the framework of a republic that he can continue to have a banana republic, if I must say it that way. So that will be, I think, the last question for the show, and what lies ahead for us if we continue in this trajectory of taking away Museveni's republic, because that seems the only way to really uproot the mustard seed.
My answer to this question is this. The Ugandan journalists, some of us who are here, have got the liberty to write and express our feelings and let the world know what is happening. Let us use this liberty, because I'm not going to be, after this program, I'm not going to be afraid to walk out of my house, go to the shops and come back. But had I been holding this interview in Uganda, I would be worried. If I walked out, are they waiting for me outside? Well, we don't have it here. Those of you Ugandan journalists who are here in Europe, who are anywhere in the United States or wherever, let us use the freedom we have to inform the world, because our colleagues, we cannot blame them. Only few of them, as I've mentioned, can be blamed openly, but others are just fearful. Let us be their eyes and ears, and let us use, like the UNN Times, to report what is happening in Uganda. Let us use all the capabilities we have, because no Ugandan journalist abroad here is going to wake up fearing for his life after a report has come out of what he or she has written. So I think this is where we have to help our colleagues in Uganda. If those colleagues in Uganda can help give us the information that they know that they cannot put on paper, let them send them to us. And we show it to the world. Evidence of corruption, evidence of murder. There's so much murder in Uganda of innocent people. We know you, our colleagues, you cannot do that because you fear for your lives. Give us the hints. Give us the stories. We will print that story. That's the only way we can go forward to make change possible in our country of birth.
And thank you so much, Senior Gombia, for having this show today. And you've ended it on a note whereby, only thing I can say, Ugandans, if we cannot change the narrative around what is happening in our nation, in our country, as you see what happened with the coverage of the Bush War and the journalism that went behind it, even though we did have our own representation there to cover the war for us, and that alone did not suffice, because internationally they were so headstrong on sanitizing Museveni and having him to be a useful tool to the West. Only us holding hands from diaspora and at home can we really dismantle and let the Ugandan voices be loud and clear that Museveni is of no use to us, rather it's of use to the Western world. That should not be our primary problem. We should be a reclaim self-governance. If Museveni has brought nothing but violence and havoc to us and our neighbors, it is time that we held hands, changed the narrative, spoke louder. Our allies will come with time, but we first have to be each other's allies. And with that, we end tonight's show. Thank you, Senior Gombia, once again. And we will see you next Sunday. We will be back. We will communicate what we will be discussing ahead of time. And we look forward to this. And if you were here tonight and you did listen, or you know a journalist, or you know anyone covering storytellers, always we are reachable at hello@getunn.com, or we can be contacted at editor@unntimes.com, or that you can replace with, Henry Gombia at getunn.times.com or Desire at getunn.times.com. And we look forward till next Sunday. God bless and have a good rest of your evening. Thank you, producer, as well.
Thank you.